look at Part 1.
Part 1.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
If you knew it would take 4 hours to walk off a pizza, would you be less likely to eat it? Researchers at Loughborough University think so. They say displaying how much exercise you need to do to burn off the calories in a product would help people eat less and bring down obesity levels. Amanda Daly is a professor of behavioural medicine and she led the study.
So our research was a review of all the studies that had looked at the effects of physical activity calorie equivalent labelling. And that's a kind of fancy way of actually labelling food so it tells you how many minutes of walking and running you have to do to burn the calories in the food. And in our results, we found that when you give people that kind of information about physical activity, it reduces the amount of food or calories that people select to consume.
What would you like to see happen then with this information?
I think it's important to think about what impact it can have. And we'd like to, eventually see this type of labelling added to current labelling so that the population have some additional information about what it will take to expend different types of food, because at the moment we know that the public don't understand calories and what that actually means, and so we think this is a really simple, easy way to kind of convert that information and make it really simple for the public to understand.
Dietitians worry that it might be dangerous information for anyone suffering from an eating disorder.
Well, we don't have any evidence of that. And, our focus really is on the health of the population overall. We have concerns around levels of obesity and cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And we think that in terms of the whole population, this may be a way in which we can encourage the whole population to really think about what they're eating and to be able to make healthy choices by giving them this kind of information.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Amanda Daly. Well, Dr. Michael Mosley is a diet and exercise expert. Some of the examples that we're talking about here, a sandwich, 445 calories, will take 42 minutes of running to burn off. A medium mocha coffee, 290 calories, that will take you 28 minutes of running. A packet of crisps, 171 calories, 16 minutes to run it off, 31 minutes to walk it off. How useful could that kind of information be if it was displayed on the front of these products?
I don't really know, but I love the fact they've done the research. I mean, I go and bang on about this stuff all the time. And when I give talks, that's what I often do. I hold up a can of something or a bar of chocolate and say, how many calories? How far do you think you have to run? How far do you think you have to walk? And people grossly underestimate how many calories they're going to get through. They grossly overestimate how many calories that they burn. They think they're going to burn off huge amounts of calories running and walking. You're not. And if it does act as a deterrent, and there seems to be some evidence from their research that it does, then I think that is absolutely brilliant. But I would love to see more research done on that.
Why do you tell people? Why do you think it's useful for them to know?
I think because, as the professor was saying, most people have no grasp of calories. But when I say to them, you know that muffin you're going to have, well, that will take you 2 hours to walk it off. And it makes them, it's the sort of additional snacks, if you like, which we sneak into our diet, which I think are largely responsible for weight gain. So it is that muffin, it is the bar of chocolate. And there is a tendency as well, people go down the gym, they run for half an hour, maybe they burn, possibly 80, 90 calories, and then they go and reward themselves with a bar of chocolate. And then they're astonished that they don't lose any weight. And so I say to people, you go down the gym on the 1st of January, do not expect to lose weight. That is the wrong goal, because the other scary stat is that to burn a pound of fat, you would have to run about 30 miles. So a kilo of fat is about 70 miles, which I calculate as the distance between Manchester and Birmingham. So you've got to have some idea of what all this means. And so I do think it's a good idea, because I don't think labelling things with calories seems to make very much difference. That's certainly what this piece of research also suggested, that simply telling people how many calories there are in their snack doesn't actually seem to deter them.
Well, let's see what the reaction on the streets has been to this.
If you can tell them you need to walk for half an hour to get rid of this burger, I know that's probably not enough, but that makes sense to me.
Personally, it probably wouldn't change what I buy.
I think the existing traffic light system is quite simple to follow. Putting anything else in place might be a bit confusing for people.
I had a little girl about 9 months ago, she is now, and I'm trying to lose weight, so it'd be nice to know what everything equals up to.
That's people on the streets. Tim Rycroft is from the Food and Drink Federation, which represents manufacturers. So how realistic would it be to get manufacturers to agree to a new labelling idea?
Well,
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2. Part 2.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Before we get started with today's conversation, I would like to take a moment out to thank you and each and every one of our loyal listeners, because we know that you appreciate all the hard work and dedication that we put into these lessons and how they continue to be helpful to you.
Today we have a small favor to ask you as a way of showing your appreciation for the work that we continue to do and to help our podcast to be known by other people. We are asking that you take the time to tell one person that you know about this podcast that you think would be interested in it. It could be a teacher, or it could be a friend that you know that is also learning English. This small action will make a big difference to make sure that Real English Conversations continues to produce these awesome conversation lessons for everyone to enjoy.
Okay, we're going to start our conversation today. We're going to talk all about Mother Earth or Mother Nature. What do we mean when we say that, when we talk about Mother Earth or Mother Nature?
Well, I think Mother Earth is just this, I guess we've made the Earth into a person, and we talk about it as if Mother Earth has power, and she's able to do things that are really powerful and almost beyond they are beyond our control, and oftentimes it's more than we can comprehend. So, for example, the Earth can produce very, very powerful weather systems, like tornadoes and hurricanes, heavy rain that can cause landslides and that sort of thing. And it can also affect weather patterns like droughts and flooding.
Right.
And we've seen a lot of these different things happening within the last year. And then we have other natural phenomenons that are like earthquakes and volcanic eruptions.
Right.
So this is what we mean when we're talking about Mother Earth and her powers. Those are like the forces of nature that happen.
It almost seems like it's up to her to produce these unbelievable things that happen.
Yeah, and often you'll hear people talk about Mother Earth is setting things back to how they should be. And it's really talking about how human civilization and the things that we build can't withstand the power of these natural events. And I think that, I don't know, it's really hard to explain how we are people. We build houses and cities in certain areas, and Mother Earth can just come along and do something and
destroy them or just affect people's lives in what seems like in an instant.
So there's a few things. Let's start by talking about some of the floods and then some of the dry periods. And we can actually talk about how British Columbia, Canada, was affected by these early in the spring this year. So where we used to live in Kelowna, BC, they had crazy flooding.
They did.
What happened?
Well, what happened was in the wintertime, they had a lot of snow. And it developed a snow pack, they call it.
Yeah, it's like a base of snow in the mountains.
So once it started to get warmer, that snowpack started to melt. But even more so, they had a more than normal amount of rain.
A higher than average amount of rain.
Right. It doubled the amount of water in that area, which caused flooding.
And Okanagan Lake it's a very, very large lake. It's more than 100 kilometers long. And I don't know how many feet it was above the maximum capacity, but I think maybe 8 feet or 2 meters or something like that. And anybody on the lake had sandbags, and they were trying to keep the water out of their houses. They had flooded basements. Really, really strange. It's never, like, what does it happen every 400 years or something?
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Yeah. And then immediately after, the rain stopped. Everyone was happy that the rain stopped, except the rain didn't start again.
No, and it got really, really dry. And during the summer, always it's forest fire season.
But this year was particularly bad.
Right.
And the air quality was horrible. There was smoke in the air so thick it was blocking the sun, and dozens of communities were affected by the forest fires. It's crazy because no rain for 2 or 3 months with warm temperatures, and the forests, they burn so easy.
So it went from one extreme to another, flooding to fires and so dry, where they actually needed all of that rain in the worst possible time. They needed that rain to happen, and it didn't.
Yeah, and maybe all that rain was happening in Puerto Vallarta, because we had no shortage of it in August and September, that's for sure.
Our friends were saying, send it our way, send some of that rain here.
Yeah, send the rain north. But yeah, and then there were actually more devastating things that were happening, and Mother Nature was being very, very strong.
Yeah.
And showing her mighty power with a couple of strong earthquakes that hit Mexico this September.
And there was 2 of them. One was, I think, 8.1, and then the second one was 7.1, I think.
Yeah, and the first one affected, where was it? In
Oaxaca.
And then the second one was in Mexico City.
Right.
And what was really coincidental in a horrible, horrible way was that the second earthquake that struck Mexico City happened on the same day as an earthquake that they suffered 32 years ago in 1985. And that earthquake in 1985 killed 10,000 people. Oh. And it was very, very devastating. So what they do now as sort of like earthquake awareness and preparation training is they have these drills on the anniversary of that earthquake to help train the citizens and help them evacuate properly and try to minimize the amount of deaths that they would experience if there was another earthquake that occurred.
So it's like safety procedures, that sort of thing.
We call it a drill, so it would be an earthquake drill. If you're preparing for fires, maybe like in school or you would have a fire drill. And
we had fire drills, yeah.
Everybody.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.